Welcome to Conversations from the Edge of Consciousness. I'm your host, Christine Madera. For me, and possibly for you, the inner world of consciousness has always been much more real and way more fun than the so-called real material world. Growing up, I thought I was alone in this, but I'm not. There are a lot of us, and far too many have no one to talk to who shares this experience. I've been lucky to cultivate a community of friends who love to talk about the energies, ideas, and vibrations that are pushing the edges of our own consciousness, as well as our collective consciousness. In Conversations from the Edge, we share our conversations with you. Welcome to Conversations from the Edge. This is your host, Christine Madera, and we are back today with Amber Mehresh. And Amber and I have been talking about her relationship with Nikola Tesla, which is absolutely fascinating. And Amber had reached out to Nikola Tesla for some help with electrical projects in her house. And it turns out that Nikola and Amber are twin flames or twin souls. And we've really explored their journey and their relationship as they go through heart expanding and the power of love to really shift timelines and consciousness and people, and to really begin to change the history of our planet and ourselves to a more heart-centered world where technology operates in harmony with the earth and serves the evolutionary well-being of all humanity. Welcome back, and thank you so much again for being here.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
All right. So last time we talked about technology and what the technology of the new earth is. And so much of the technology there is really hand in glove with the consciousness that supports that kind of state of living. And so today we really wanted to talk more about that state of mind, that state of being, the state of consciousness in this new earth. But before we get to that, there was a really interesting way that Nikola explained how to imagine where we are now and new earth, and a description of what new earth really is. And can you start with that and tell us what that experience was like?
I'd be happy to. So at the beginning of the series of meditations, which I did in collaboration with you, Nikola, on the first meditation, before he showed me anything else, wanted to help me grasp what it meant when people speak of this new earth place. Because it's not just a linear, direct future possibility in terms of being on a physical plane from us. But it's really rather a dimensional shift that we humans make. And so he gave me this little demonstration, and I'll just describe it. It was very visual, so it might be a little challenging for me to put into words, but I'll do my best to describe what he showed me and what it meant.
Okay.
So he took me into a forest meadow, and he takes out his handkerchief, right? And then he grabs a little stick and he ties his handkerchief to a stick. And he plants that into a spot in the middle of the meadow. And he says, "Oh, this is new earth. This little flag that I've planted represents new earth." And then he explained that by new earth, he meant not just like a place, but rather a state of being in which humans are most in harmony with themselves and nature. It's their most ideal way of being.
And I love that definition of new earth because it makes it really accessible, maybe not so much in, I know where the direction is in time and space, but kind of a destination for everybody to begin to gear toward. So where you personally are living in your greatest harmony with yourself and in your greatest harmony with the world. And I know that's always a work in progress, but it does really seem to make it much simpler than sometimes what we hear about New Earth.
Yes, it's really a shift within ourselves to align with that dimension and to align with the vibration that exists there.
Okay. And so, he had also talked about where people are in relationship to this new earth. And can you describe that a little bit?
Yes. Okay. So he planted his flag in the ground in the middle of this meadow, and he says, okay, this is point B,
Mm-hmm.
the new earth. And
Uh-huh.
then he says, where you're standing now is point A. So he says, how do you get from point A to point B? How do you
Mm-hmm.
get from where you are now to the new earth, to that state of being in the new earth? And so I said, well, you can simply walk over there. And he says, yes, you can walk. You can go straight. You can take
Uh-huh.
a straight line, a direct route, or you could zigzag, or
Mm-hmm.
you could go in a spiral, and you could get to a new earth by any number of steps that eventually got you to that point. And then he pointed, and then he like showed the whole rest of the meadow. And he's like, all the rest of that meadow, wherever you're standing in this meadow would be your point A that you're coming
Mm-hmm.
from. And so from any spot in this meadow, from any spot in human existence, it could lead to that new earth dimension. You could take that direct route to new earth, or you could take a zigzag spiral, but whatever path that you take, you could reach new earth. And then he pointed over in the distance and
Mm-hmm.
he said, over there, that part of the meadow, that's the apocalypse.
Which we don't want to go to.
Right. So he said you could get to the from the apocalypse to
Wow.
new earth. You
Uh-huh.
could take that, but that's a very different path from the
Yeah.
apocalypse back to new earth than the path that you would take from where you're standing currently. And so it would just be a different path, but you
Mm-hmm.
could get there. You could.
Well, the thing
And
I love about
uh-huh,
this is
uh-huh.
that everybody can be in a different place with the meadow, and everybody has their own path to new earth. And that it also, in addition to being a collective path, because we all sort of move to that, hopefully, as we choose to, but that we don't require that everybody around you takes the same path or walks from your same place or reflects back to you the same new earth. Like, it seems like it's both, there's the collective aspect to it, but there's the individual aspect of your own state of being and state of consciousness to get to new earth. And that if everybody's moving in that general direction in their own general way, we can all make it there, somehow, without trying to homogenize all of society to get everybody in lockstep in the exact same way to get to this place that we call new earth.
Yes, and I think you're right, and it's not necessarily just on an individual and collective,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I think he also is talking about as from a soul
Mm,
perspective,
yeah.
and he pointed out that I could go from my point A where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
I could go over way over there to the apocalypse
Mm-hmm.
and then make my way back to, again to New Earth spot. I could take that route if,
Uh-huh.
you know,
If you
so
really
on
wanted
a,
to.
yeah, if I want to, and on a soul level, that
Mm-hmm.
option is available. And so,
Mm.
us humans on a soul level, we have seen, we perceive, I should say, we perceive all those options.
Okay.
And as we allow our soul to guide us, it'll guide us to the place that we want to be. If we want
Okay.
to go over there and explore kind of
Mm-hmm.
that dark, scary place,
Mm-hmm.
we certainly can, and there's no judgment involved in
Mm-hmm.
doing so.
Right.
But is that really where you want to live?
Yeah. Yeah. No, great question. Okay, so let's actually talk about what is this state of being and this state of consciousness, this dimensional, I don't know, beingness, for lack of a better term. And how does this operate? How is it different than what we have now? And how do we begin to cultivate this?
It is different in that the New Earth humans
Mm-hmm.
are deeply, deeply connected with themselves in all the ways of what it means to be a human, and they accept themselves. I would say, there's so many different terminologies for it.
Mm-hmm.
They live in a self-realized state in
Mm-hmm.
which they realize themselves as the divine. There's unity consciousness in which
Mm-hmm.
they are so expanded in their consciousness that they perceive themselves all as one with all other beings and
Mm-hmm.
one as, you know, as God, and they're simply an expression of
Mm-hmm.
God, of the divine. So there's so many different terminologies, but what it comes down to this is being so in touch with themselves on a soul level that they're really connecting with that place um, where they are their multidimensional selves, and where
Mm-hmm.
they're able to connect with others from that perspective. From their perspective, everybody else is also in their state of divine perfection and union as individuals.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and when you were saying that, like, I just wanted to check in with this because it would also make sense that if you're operating from this multidimensional state and you're so deeply connected, we tend, as our human selves now, to think about these terms of connection in terms of other beings with, other human beings and other beings with cognitive brain processes that, you connect with another humanoid or another being that expresses its consciousness similar than we do, or maybe to an animal or something like that. But it seems to me, if we're living in that state of harmony with earth, that being in that state of connection with the earth energy and with living in harmony with that earth energy is part of that multidimensional experience. Is that true?
Yes, and Nikola very specifically told me that you cannot reach New Earth dimension.
Mm-hmm.
You can't reach that perspective without being in your multidimensional awareness. It's part of the experience of being there.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that means to be in that multidimensional experience?
A little bit. I mean, I'm still living where I am, so
Mm-hmm.
I have a somewhat still, I'm still in my limited perspective. I haven't
Mm-hmm.
completely let go of those limited perspectives yet, but I'll do my best.
Okay.
When I step into that space with Nikola,
Mm-hmm.
into that sort of new earth space, and that space where I meditate with him, there's a certain freedom of exploration of my soul. I can
Mm-hmm.
step into whatever form that I choose to be in for whatever experience or for whatever learning that I
Mm-hmm.
want to experience. For example, sandwiched in between these new earth meditations and visits
Mm-hmm.
to new earth
Mm-hmm.
was this multidimensional experience that Nikola took me to,
Oh.
in which he took me to this like fortress that was built on this pinnacle
Mm-hmm.
and in the mountains. And to reach there, like we took a little portal pathway,
Mm-hmm.
and that opened up in the cliff face. And then from this cliff face,
Mm-hmm.
we like flew over. We are still in our human forms,
Mm-hmm.
but in this space, we're able to do whatever we intend to do. So if you intend to fly, you can fly. If you intend to breathe underwater, you can breathe underwater. You pull in the energy to be able to express that in your
Mm-hmm.
reality. And so we flew over to this fortress, and then we reached this, and it was like full on castle fortress. And
Uh-huh.
so it had like, and there was like nothing but air around it. It was so high up in the sky.
Uh-huh. Wow.
And then around the actual fortress was a moat with a drawbridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I told Nicola, isn't the moat a little bit, excessive,
Yeah.
like we're already
Well, if you can fly there anyway, what's the point of the moat?
right.
Yeah.
Right. The only way to get here is to fly. What's the moat going to do? So he's
Uh-huh.
laughing. But he's like, it's tradition. Just go with
Oh.
it. In this place, we met some of our soul family, and then we, as a soul family, there were two other couples, so there were six
Mm-hmm.
of us, and we gathered around. Like they had this little round sofa type
Mm-hmm.
arrangement to where we were like sitting knee to knee, like facing each other in this circle,
Mm-hmm.
holding our hands in a certain way. It felt both very ritualistic, but it also
Mm-hmm.
felt very practical. And then we as a group like stepped into ourselves as lightning beings.
Oh.
And I felt like I experienced myself moving with the storm clouds, and
Mm-hmm.
like I had the desire to reach down onto the earth and touch it. And so from the clouds, instead of like my human hand reaching down and touching the earth, it was a
Mm-hmm.
lightning bolt. And
Wow.
then I was like so surprised and delighted because I'm still
Uh-huh.
coming from my human perspective. I was
Right.
like so
Yeah.
surprised at that I started laughing. And instead of human laughter, it was thunder.
Wow.
And so we got to step into that experience of ourselves as lightning beings. And then at the end of that experience, Nikola wanted, he always has a point wherever he
Mm-hmm.
takes me, he has some lesson or some meaning
Mm-hmm.
for me to learn or to experience. And so he says, he says, I know you feel sometimes a little bit bad that you don't understand all the math or the physics concepts
Mm-hmm.
in the same way that I do, and you think that you're not tech savvy and that you don't understand electricity and
Mm-hmm.
the way that my electrical devices work. He's like, but I want you to understand that, you may not at this moment where you are now, you might not know all the math involved,
Mm-hmm.
but you have the experience of being lightning. And when you're in New Earth,
Uh-huh.
when you're in the dimension of being there, you're in awareness of all of you. You're in awareness that you're so much more expanded than
Mm-hmm.
just your human form. You are like living within your human form,
Mm-hmm.
but you have this deep realization that you're also so much more.
Let's talk about that just a little bit because oftentimes, especially people who are spiritual or even religious people, and people have this idea that our spiritual form is somehow separate from our physical form in the sense that our physical form holds us back and our spiritual form is some sort of pure form of ourself. But in New Earth, that seems like everything is much more in tune and that your physical body, your physical self is an expression of that spiritual form, and that there's an acceptance that those two go together, which seems almost to me like you'd have to have that level of integration and acceptance in order to live at that level of harmony as a spiritual being in your human form.
Yes. And I understand what you're saying about our tendency to think that the physical is somehow lesser than the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual, and that we need to like ascend out of our physical
Yeah.
natures.
Mm-hmm.
But rather New Earth awareness, we understand that our physical is part of what makes us be able to uniquely express certain
Mm-hmm.
aspects of our spirituality. Our body is an expression of our spiritual selves
Mm-hmm.
and very certain aspects and abilities of it. So like as humans, a human, us in human form, we have different specialties and abilities than say some other even another earth being like a plant,
Mm-hmm.
let alone other alien beings from other galaxies, which are also there in that new earth dimension.
I want to get to that. But before we get to that, what can you talk a little bit more about how humans, like the state of being, the state of consciousness, the state of mind in this new earth among everyday people as they live their life and how that's expressed and how they experience that and a little bit just a little touch on because we've talked about this last time about how that has created the kind of society that they have.
Oh, well, certainly. And it is purposely cultivated, the sense of being in connection with
Mm-hmm.
yourself as a spiritual being that is cultivated. Like, for example, I'll just tell a little bit more about the the education system that they have
Mm-hmm.
there.
Okay.
Um, for this, Nikola and I traveled down to, um, yeah, somewhere in the Amazon, some Amazon jungle,
Mm-hmm.
and we met with a couple. We went to their and they lived like very simply. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have, what you would consider technology.
Mm-hmm.
They lived in a hut made of sticks and dried leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went in to meet them, and they were the shamans of their tribe, and they still lived very tribally. And
Mm-hmm.
that culture and that heritage of them living as their tribal selves was also valued. It was acknowledged and recognized and valued
Mm-hmm.
within New Earth society, and nobody was trying to change them and force them into a so-called civilized
Right.
state.
Okay.
They
Mm-hmm.
they accepted their culture as it was, and for the value and gifts that way of being and that way of life brought to the rest of humanity.
Okay.
And so we met with them, and the reason we met with them is to show part of the education system, and they were apprenticing two little kids. There was a brother and sister, somewhere
Mm-hmm.
around like 8 and 10 years old, and the shamanic couple themselves was clearly, of indigenous um,
Mm-hmm.
Amazonian heritage. And then these two kids were little white kids
Oh,
who were all
wow. Okay.
sun tanned, and then like
Uh-huh.
super sun
Uh-huh.
bleached blonde hair and bright blue eyes. And these two kids had been, like their education system had helped them discover that they were deeply interested in the plant world
Mm-hmm.
and all things that go along with connection to the plants.
Mm-hmm.
And so this shamanic couple was apprenticing these two children and teaching them all they knew. And these two children were learning how to be shamans, but they were also learning all about plants. They were learning what lighting conditions, the water conditions, soil
Mm-hmm.
conditions. They were learning everything associated with plant well being and
Mm-hmm.
happiness, which isn't, again, it wasn't just that us humans want to cultivate a plant, so we need to study how to do that best. No, it was done also for the plant well being and the happiness
Mm.
of the plant,
Mm-hmm.
right? The plant happiness was as important
Yeah.
as what was being asked of it to serve the human, you know?
So it was a partnership really between
Yeah,
plant and human as opposed to a cultivation of plants by humans for our own use.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so when I talked to these children and asked them what they were doing and how they hoped to apply this to their
Mm-hmm.
lives and to their future work, they're like, we want to be plant ambassadors, because
Wow.
they were cultivating this deep ability to
Mm-hmm.
communicate with the plants and to deeply understand plants and what made the plants happy. So that then and then the woman who was teaching them, said, I asked her, do you enjoy this teaching? And she said, I enjoy it very much. And she says, my own son has grown and left, and so now I
Mm-hmm.
have this opportunity to have two more children in my home that I get to teach.
Wow.
Everything that I've learned can be passed on to them. And then she gave the example of what her son was doing. Her son had decided that he wanted to live in the city. And so he was working with, um, it wasn't corporations as we know it, but it was some
Mm-hmm.
sort of architecture committee,
Mm-hmm.
I guess you
Oh,
could call
okay.
it. And his job, because he was also taught from, his parents how to work with plants and how to be a plant communicator, he could take that skill and apply it now to what was required of these buildings, this architectural firm in the city, and say they wanted a very particular plant to grow on the side of their building. This young man knew exactly the porosity and the what the nutrients needed that could grow that plant on the side of their building,
Wow.
just as an example.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And
So it does
yeah,
sound like a completely different orientation of humans to the rest of the natural world. And humans to one another. And then you brought up aliens. So we're going to go there because I find that fascinating. Because you had
sure.
said last time or in between shows, I can't remember that in this new Earth and the dimensionality that is in the multidimensional sense of that humans have of themselves extends to the life in other parts of our galaxy and beyond.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And
So talk about that a
yes.
little bit.
Okay, certainly. So part of the being in this dimension and being able to exist in this
Mm-hmm.
dimension also applies to the alien life and those in the other galaxies. So they also are at their highest state of being. So everybody's in a state of peace. So
Okay,
there's no
so
alien invasion where they're attacking us and we have to figure out, yeah, somehow these aliens, built all this amazing technology to get here. We haven't
uh-huh.
managed to go really anywhere, but somehow we'll outsmart them.
I know, isn't that ridiculous?
It's funny, but they always we here, we always tend to cast the aliens in a really dark role.
Yeah.
And so it's not like that. Everybody's at peace with each other, and the aliens want to experience Earth as both a tourist destination, but also
hmm
to learn from each other and, exchange of ways of life and doing things.
So, and I just want to reiterate this because you kind of slipped it in, and I just want to specify it so people can hear it. Is that this new Earth is really part of almost a different galactic timeline in that New Earth is one in communication with these different alien species, but they are also in their highest form of peacefulness and communication with Earth. So it's not necessarily that Earth is sort of its standalone, the hot mess that we have at Earth in the midst of the same, I guess, galaxy or the galactic timeline as New Earth is in, but the new Earth is part of the larger galactic story that's a little bit different than what ours is currently.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
correct.
All right. Wow. That's there's so much there. So what should I be interested in asking you about this? Because I don't even know where to go.
Well, okay. Well, let's talk about aliens a
Let's do
little
that.
bit.
All right.
Okay, so how Nikola introduced me to this idea. Okay, so we traveled to a different mountain than
Mm-hmm.
the lightning being. So this was like a different mountain, a forest, a mountain forest,
Mm-hmm.
and he took me to this kind of, it looked like a cathedral type of building. It was
Mm-hmm.
very ornate. It had stained glass all over it. And again, like every roof that I saw of every building had plants growing all over it, and this was no exception. So it had the usual plants hanging all off and growing on the roof. But then they
Mm-hmm.
also had a lot of skylights. And when I stepped into the home, I guess you could call it that, Uh, the skylights had certain patterns and stained glass patterns
Mm-hmm.
that the couple who lived there explained were demonstrate as the light came through it, especially shining from certain constellation arrangements with the night sky. It would
Mm-hmm.
show different patterns as it went through their stained glass. So they had
Wow.
somehow their skylight was like coordinated with the whole constellation movement.
Oh my
It was like
gosh.
way complicated. And so,
Uh-huh.
anyway, this couple that we were talking to was Palladian. They're like super tall
Mm-hmm.
and kind of almost angelic looking, definitely not human.
Mm-hmm.
They said they were Palladian.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said, well, is this your home? And so they're like, oh, well, no, not exactly. And then Nikola explained, he's like, yeah, they do live here. He's like, but they don't, they're saying it's not their home because their home is, on Pallades. They consider
Uh-huh.
that their home. And he said, "Yeah, we're in the Palladian embassy." I was like,
Oh,
oh, and
wow.
these were the Palladian ambassadors that live in that embassy. And so then we took a little, I don't know, car.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it wasn't a car like we with our wheels. It was like a sort of little mini spaceship.
Mm-hmm.
And we all got in and we flew to a spaceport. And so we arrived at a spaceport
Mm-hmm.
and it was this massive, not just one building, but sort of series of buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was massive. Nikola explained that it's bigger than any of our current airports. It was
Okay.
pretty huge. And like I just notice these little things sometimes. So we get out of our little spaceship or earth ship or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So we step out and the landing pad where the spaceships would land,
Mm-hmm.
instead of like being a strip of asphalt like we think of at our airports,
Mm-hmm.
it was this material that was porous. It was like a cement, but it wasn't cement. It was porous. And
Mm-hmm.
so it would like allow the moisture to go through to the ground the way that it's supposed to and stuff.
Yeah.
And yet it was still a firm surface, that made for a good landing pad.
Mm-hmm.
And so we go into the spaceport, into the actual building, and that was super interesting. Oh, well, first of all, the little spaceship or Earth ship that we were
Mm-hmm.
in, um, they could use it for space travel, but Nikola had modified their technology to be able to travel around Earth as well, because
Mm-hmm.
apparently, the different environments and atmospheres and gravity levels and whatnot on each
Mm-hmm.
planet require slight modifications in
Yeah,
their ships and able
that
to
makes sense.
so
Yeah.
there was that. So he helps with that design process and stuff. And anyway, okay, so back to the spaceport.
Yeah.
So this space sorry, I keep getting so distracted.
No, that's so
There was
interesting.
just so much to see.
Yeah.
I was a little overwhelmed. So within the spaceport, it was sort of like a mini portrayal of all the climates and all the cultures of Earth, so that when
Wow.
aliens arrived,
Uh-huh.
um, and they could say, "Okay, well, what's your desert like?" They
Uh-huh.
could like bring them to that part of the spaceport, and
Mm-hmm.
it had been designed to be like a desert environment. So within the spaceport, they could go and experience each of the different little Earth ecosystems.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nikola explained that not only was that for the entertainment and enjoyment of the visiting aliens
Mm-hmm.
to experience that, but the spaceport also acted as like sort of, we would think of it as a conference center
Mm-hmm.
where large gatherings could occur, and sort of, you wanted a desert wedding and didn't want to actually go to the desert, and you wanted that whole convention center with
Uh-huh.
the infrastructure to support that large gathering, you could go to
Uh-huh.
the spaceport.
Wow. So it's like an ecological Epcot Center.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Okay. That's so cool. So if these aliens came and they said, "Oh, I like this desert," then could they then go to the actual desert and hang out there for a
Right.
while?
Exact.
Okay.
If that's what they wanted to do. And I did want to mention that Nikola did say, he explained that each spaceport or each
Mm-hmm.
planet has a certain signal that they transmit.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and all the planets likewise have their equivalent of their spaceport, and they have a unique signature signal unique to their planet. And
Mm-hmm.
so that when you were traveling in space, you could tune to that particular signal to get to the particular planet that you were going. I don't know. He was just
Oh.
explaining that every planet has its unique signal in order to, I guess not get, so that when you're space traveling to not get lost.
Well, it's like an interplanetary GPS, it sounds like. Also
Yeah, something
a
like that.
galactic positioning system instead of a global positioning system. So you can still say GPS. It sounds like then that you could, there was travel or is travel between these places. So one would assume that all of these beings travel much faster than the speed of light. Did you ever get into any of that? Like how that works or how fast travel would be between, say, a spaceport here and the Pleiades, which is, when you look at it from a light year perspective, not really that far. I mean, relatively speaking.
Yeah, that is part of the multidimensionality aspect
Mm-hmm.
um of that place,
Mm-hmm.
is that you're not limited to what we would think of being confined to our physical restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
Um so you yeah, somehow, yeah, it's not limited to physical physics, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. But yeah, it's really fast and they know where all the portals are,
Mm-hmm.
and to get from point A to B planet wise.
In our culture, like you were saying, we tend to have, the humans as the good guys and the aliens as the bad guys. And in all improbable altercations between humans and aliens, humans somehow, because it's in the script, win. And but there's not that many models of humans and extraterrestrials working together and playing together and being in relationship with one another in a positive way. So in this new earth, is human alien interaction like a part of just everybody's daily life, or is it a few people, or how does that work?
Yeah, again, it depends on the individual interests. It's an opportunity that everybody, if they choose to
Mm-hmm.
interact. Like for example,
Okay.
that shamanic couple in the jungle,
Mm-hmm.
like they were really content and happy to, like I said, they didn't have any electronics. They didn't have,
Mm-hmm.
like, we also rode a boat in the jungle, and the guy was like, he had oars that he was rowing for it, and I'm like, not even like a motor on his boat. and, and Nicola's like, no, they choose to live like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so not everybody chooses to, go
Right.
talk to the aliens, go interact with the aliens. And of course, if that's of your interest, usually your interest is pretty specific. Like, hey, I have this project that I'm working on. Let's go
Mm-hmm.
talk to this alien. They're experts on this. Or, it's usually in relation to some project that we are, that captures our interest or work.
Are there enough aliens living on Earth or in, visiting Earth or whatever at any particular time that say you had, hey, I've got a project I'd really like to talk to a Palladian about this, that it would be fairly easy to seek one out? Or is it something that is just not that many people or not that many visitors?
I didn't ask that specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I imagine it would be something like, like here, like say you have a cultural ambassador coming
Mm-hmm.
from, who has a specialty from this unique, interesting culture that you want to learn from and you want to experience from, and you're going to fly them out for this big conference. And so people are going to be excited and it's going to be a whole program made of it because it's a
Mm-hmm.
special guest and they'll be like your guest of honor. I imagine it might be something like that. I'm not sure.
All right,
um
but it does sound, specifically that it is not a fear-based interaction between
no,
humans and visitors
right.
to our planet,
And
like is kind of portrayed now.
right. And Nikola did say that there's a lot of the technology about human alien interaction
Mm-hmm.
goes in, like, for example, say an alien that's from a completely different atmosphere wants to come visit Earth and
Mm-hmm.
isn't able to handle our oxygen levels or whatever, our atmosphere
Mm-hmm.
is. And so a lot of the technology goes into creating a system for them, like either a spacesuit or something that would modify them physically somehow that they would be able to breathe our atmosphere or not need to breathe,
Mm-hmm.
or do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
he said there's technologies that go into that, as well as technologies of humans that want to go visit other planets. That I did ask him about, and he's like, no, not
Okay.
everybody wants to space travel. Some people do, but not everybody does. And because Earth is such a happy, harmonious place, it's
Mm-hmm.
not like we're trying to escape from here.
I mean, I would love it to go and see something different. I'm a traveler, so I like to go and see how other people live and to go and see other places and things that are interesting. So I would be on board with going
Yeah.
to
Okay.
somewhere.
So,
And so does
okay.
that's possible. I want to be
Yeah, of
there.
course. Of
Okay.
course. And of course you would have the opportunities for the training and everything that would be required in order to make such a travel. And Nicola is kind of saying that such a adventure
Mm-hmm.
and wish. I didn't even really tell you about kind of the point system
Oh,
in
well,
operation. They
okay.
don't have money, but they do have
Uh-huh.
a way of tracking kind of what people want to do and how
Mm-hmm.
to make it happen.
Okay.
Like, okay, so like my friend who gave me the example of the 100 people delegation to New York
Mm-hmm.
City,
Right. In our last
um,
podcast. So go back and
right,
listen to that.
in our
Okay.
previous conversation,
Uh-huh.
and so I said, well, what if there's like a couple large delegations that want to come all at once and there's not the infrastructure available? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
do you decide who gets to come? And so she explained, well, we do have a point system, and
Mm-hmm.
that point system evaluates the purpose of their visit, the community give back of their visit,
Mm-hmm.
the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of things go into that. And for example, a tourist, somebody who just wants to go to New York City just to vacation, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't actually have any work, they're not going to sign up to be the food workers. They're not going to sign
Mm-hmm.
up for any, they just want to come here for fun and to visit as
Uh-huh.
a tourist. They might have lesser points, and so they're put on the list that, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this person wants to come to New York City, and they don't have the points to be like a high priority. However, the longer that they sit on that wait list, by virtue of sitting on that wait list, they're building up points, and there will come a moment where their points are enough that they're like, okay, you're next. You get to come
Okay.
here as a tourist, and just,
Mm-hmm.
food's provided for you, housing is provided for you, clothing apparently can also be
This is
provided for you.
great. Yeah.
You just show up. Just show up.
So, all
And so
right.
Nick, yeah, so it would be a similar thing for
Okay.
space travel,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay, what are your qualifications? How many points does that earn you that you've learned and studied to prepare
Mm-hmm.
for this? And then how long have you waited for this opportunity? Yeah, so that all would
Mm-hmm.
be factored in, but eventually that you would get your opportunity. Like you would
Okay.
not miss out. You would get to experience that.
All right. Well, good. Although I'd be happy to do work study. So, take me away somewhere would be awfully fun. All right. So what are some other qualities of being or consciousness that are common to New Earth and the people of New Earth that are maybe different than what we have now?
Okay, I'll use the aliens for example again, because they demonstrated it so well. So the visiting aliens, they have technology that,
Mm-hmm.
like, for some of them, not everybody has the same technology, right? They all come
Mm-hmm.
from different civilizations. But some have the technology that, like, we have a little phone on our wrist, we have our little cell phone on our
Mm-hmm.
wrist that
Mm-hmm.
can call up anybody else in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They have a similar device that can communicate back with somebody on their home planet,
Ooh.
or they can simply use their telepathic ability,
Okay.
right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
whatever they and me and Nikola, like we we are traveling everywhere on trains and stuff and spaceships or earth ships, I guess. But we can also go into a meditation
Mm-hmm.
and bilocate. We have that spiritual ability that we can also access.
Okay. And is that, I know it's available. Is that kind of the prevailing culture to develop those levels of abilities, or are those things that some people do, but most people don't?
I would say that everybody has the ability, but not everybody cultivates it, and not everybody really cares to focus on developing those particular, what you would call, spiritual or psychic
Mhm.
abilities, I guess. But it's within the potential of everybody. And if they want to cultivate that, then they certainly can, but not everybody does. Some just simply exist in the physical space for the enjoyment of fully experiencing the physicality
Mhm.
of getting in a train and feeling that train speed along through your environment. And because that also is a physical experience. And some souls are here for the physical experience. They're like, "Ooh, why do we want to bilocate when I can ride a train?"
But the common thing amongst a New Earth is that sense of connection with one another and with Earth and with their multicultural, that like the multicultural sense of self. Okay. And different people have different ways that they would explore and express that. Because I mean, if you think about it, there are stories of people who bilocate now, so, and who don't have to eat now. And, there's very small numbers of people who have some of these gifts that technically would be available to everybody, but we don't really have that base understanding of who we are to really step into cultivate a gift like that. And there's really nobody to teach you because those teachers, there's just not enough people who do those things regularly to be able to teach that.
Right. And in this, like, okay, so yeah, where we are now, if you
Mm-hmm.
wanted to cultivate that ability, say, I don't want to eat food anymore. I want to
Mm-hmm.
live off cosmic energy,
Mm-hmm.
or I want to live off the sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could go in search of those teachings and those people who could teach you, or you can go within and meditate
Mm-hmm.
and, on a soul level, learn how to do that. But it's a little bit more effort for us, right? And it could require years of commitment in
Mm-hmm.
order to reach that goal. When you're in new earth dimension, and if
Mm-hmm.
you have that desire, say, I don't want to eat anymore, it's much easier and much quicker process to
Right.
learn and cultivate that.
Like if you were to look at one or two really significant things that people could do to begin to get from where they are now at their own point A to point B in this new earth, via a different kind of state of being or state of consciousness, what would you recommend?
My recommendation is to find the ways in your life today that put you in alignment with peace, with harmony, with a inner being centered in your own being and own authenticity. And because a lot of aligning with the new earth dimension is being in alignment with who you truly are on a soul level,
Mm-hmm.
as you're um in that alignment with your soul. You don't have the disease and the struggles, because you're aligning to a different reality. You're aligning to a different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of how to phrase it in a way that might be useful just for an everyday person
Okay.
who wants to make this a goal to go live a new earth. Number one way, I would find some way of meditation that's
Mm-hmm.
in alignment with your own soul. So whether that's sound meditation, whether that's transcendental meditation, where you leave everything out of your mind and you simply experience simply being.
Mm-hmm.
What but there is that space of quietness where you just kind of leave all the chaos and this chaotic energy of the reality that we're existing in currently.
Mm-hmm.
There is a process of letting go of all of that and finding your peaceful center. And
Okay.
however you arrive at that peaceful center point,
Mm-hmm.
do that. And it's been interesting in these meditations that I did to go visit these different new earth experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I've come out of it, and I've been noticing that my mental chatter
Mm-hmm.
is is really quieted down compared to what it was. And I'm experiencing just feeling my own presence and feeling my own energy and awareness, rather than the mental chatter that I usually have. I usually have this constant inner dialogue going,
Mm-hmm.
and that's quieted down to where I don't need to translate my internal experience into this constant verbal stream, but rather simply be present with my internal experience. And I think the
Yeah.
more somebody's able to access that own quiet internal experience of theirs,
Mm-hmm.
they'll be able to find their own perfect harmonious self and be
Mm-hmm.
in alignment with the new earth energy and dimension.
And I think that really is the key because, the mental chatter is trying to navigate that through some sort of cognitive process. And that's one thing that you can't get from point A to New Earth through the cognitive process. It is through that deep sense of connection. So you're absolutely right. I think if you begin to cultivate that sense of connection with your deep self, with your soul self, with the earth, with the harmonious energies, like that is how you actually connect with that new earth. And I have had the same experience in meditation, that over the years that the mental chatter has really gone away. And I had an experience. I had a kind of really bad concussion 3 years ago now, and for 3 or 4 months, I couldn't think. There was no I couldn't there was no I couldn't do mental chatter because it was part of my cognitive process. Could I
Hmm.
could be in a state of awareness, but I couldn't be in a state of chatter. And it really showed me like how actually little I needed any of that chatter. It was mostly just noise, and how much I could function without thinking about what I was doing. Like I could be in a state of awareness and cook dinner without cutting my fingers off, for example, and I could drive a car and stuff. But I was really aware of when my thought processes went from being in that state of quiet awareness to being in that state of thought, because as soon as I was in the state of actually thinking, that cognitive mind, my head hurt. It was
Oh.
a really exceptional teaching process that I do not recommend to anybody. But it is amazing how much more centered you can be when you find those ways to let go of the inner chatter without, trying to squish it down or repress it, or, do any of those things that are sort of inner self-harming.
And I would emphasize that because we think of, oh, how do we get to New Earth? And we often think of, okay, well, how can we shape and change our external world? How can
Mm-hmm.
we, down with our governments, or, and
Use
and
technology to get
down
there.
down with our corporate controllers,
Uh-huh.
let's escape from all of them. Let burn it all. And,
Uh-huh.
but that's still very external, and that's not how you reach there.
Yeah.
It's a every individual reaches there by going within and finding their own peace. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been strange kind of straddling both worlds sometimes with doing this little exercise of visiting there.
Well, I really appreciate that you put in so much time and energy and focus and effort to do this, because I had just asked Amber, hey, what do you think? Could you go in and, see what this new earth is like? And I got some questions, and, let's explore that. And, she really took the bull by the horns and spent quite a bit of time doing this, because we had that conversation 3 or 4 months ago. So I deeply, deeply appreciate what you have done with this, and how much information you're bringing back. And so thank you very, very much.
Oh, thank you. It was truly my pleasure.
Thank you. All right. So you can find Amber's information on conversationsfromtheedge.net, or under the show notes if you're listening to this somewhere else. And you can connect with her YouTube page and Instagram, various different things. So go ahead and do that. And thank you again for speaking with us today. And is there any last little thing that you want to say, or are you feeling complete?
Nikola just whispered something. He's like, remember to
Oh,
say
okay.
this. Yeah, and this is coming from him. So remember, like he was like
Okay.
super into technology.
Mm-hmm.
And he says there were times in his lifetime, the lifetime that we know it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the whole thing. The lifetime that led to ours.
Right. Yeah.
He frequently thought that his technology and his introduction of technology would be what saves
Mm-hmm.
humanity from war, saves humanity from starvation, from poverty,
Mm-hmm.
from overwork and poor work conditions.
Mm-hmm.
That technology would be our savior.
Mm-hmm.
He says, even he realizes, and he says, please, I'm Nikola Tesla. So if I'm saying this, please understand, it's
Right.
not technology
Mm-hmm.
that will shift us to the new earth reality.
Mm-hmm.
It is our own peace, our expanded consciousness and awareness, not
Excellent.
technology.
Yeah. And that's so true, because too much technology without that is how, we get to thermonuclear war. It's taking those ability to hurt, harm, and action fear, and ratcheting it up into something that could really kill everybody all at the same time. Whereas if we have that inner state, like of New Earth, where we are in a state of harmony and connection and love, and the highest good for all, and honoring one another, the kind of technology and the use of technology that we develop from that is very, very different. And that's, I think, what is in evidence in New Earth.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right. Well, thank you to you. Thank you, Nicola, for bringing us that. And I look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thank you so much.
This is your host, Christine Madera. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation from the edge of consciousness. You can find all our conversations at conversationsfromtheedge.net. You'll also find links to schedule a private conversation with me or any of my friends, as well as tools to help you expand your own consciousness and explore what's possible for you outside the boundaries of your current perceptions. Feel free to use this podcast to start your own conversation by sharing it with friends, on social media, in your blog, or even in your own podcast. And as always, live the adventure of pushing your own edge. It's the most amazing adventure there is.